and I don't think he was the main person. I think he was the guy outside who was waiting for them to come out. Because if you have a gate like that, a security gate on the front door, you're not getting into that. You're never going to break into that security gate.
For 44 days, investigators and the public have continued asking the same question about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. How did the masked suspect on her front porch get inside? The doorbell footage shows him standing at her door in the early hours of February 1st, 2026. Head down, gloves on, carrying a backpack, with a gun holster on his right hip. That footage has been reviewed hundreds of times, with every movement and every second he spent on the porch carefully analyzed, in an effort to understand how he managed to enter the home of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night, without waking her, without alerting neighbors, and without leaving any clear signs of forced entry. Every forced entry leaves something behind. That's what investigators believed from the start. They questioned every possibility. Did he pick the lock? Did he have a key? Did he find an unlocked window? Or did Nancy, without her hearing aids, simply fail to hear him break in? But now, it's becoming clear, those may have been the wrong questions all along. Because there is one detail about Nancy Guthrie's front door that changes everything we thought we understood about that night. It was always there, visible in the footage, present in every photo of her home, documented in public records, familiar to anyone living in homes like hers in the Southwest, yet somehow overlooked. Nancy Guthrie didn't just have a doorbell camera. She didn't just rely on a standard wooden door with a deadbolt. She had something more, a metal security gate. Wrought iron mesh, reinforced with a solid steel frame. The kind of barrier that, once locked, is nearly impossible to break through without tools, without noise, and without leaving clear, undeniable damage. Damage investigators would have noticed immediately upon arriving at the scene. According to a neighbor living just 4 houses away, someone who has the exact same type of security gate, there is simply no scenario where the man seen on that porch was attempting to force his way through the front door. It wouldn't have been possible. Not in 41 minutes, not without visible tools, and certainly not without making enough noise to wake the entire neighborhood. Which leads to a far more unsettling possibility. Someone opened that gate from the inside. This is the latest development in the Nancy Guthrie case, and it has the potential to change everything. But before going further, it's important to be clear about what this actually is, and what it isn't. What you're about to hear is a theory, one put forward by a neighbor with first-hand experience of the security systems commonly used in homes throughout the Catalina foothills. A theory that is now gaining attention, supported by publicly available evidence and reinforced by analysis from former FBI agents who have closely examined the case. At this stage, it's important to be absolutely clear, this is not an accusation. No one has been charged. No one has been arrested. The Guthrie family has been fully and officially cleared. What this video does is raise a question that the physical evidence itself demands. If forced entry through the front door was nearly impossible because of the security gate, then how did the suspect get inside? And time after time, investigators, security experts, and even neighbors familiar with these systems are arriving at the same unsettling conclusion. Someone may have let him in. To understand why that possibility matters, we need to look closer at Nancy Guthrie's life. At 84 years old, she disappeared from her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, in the early hours of February 1, 2026. She had lived in Tucson for more than 5 decades, raising 3 children there after her husband, Charles, died in 1988 at the age of 49 during a mining expedition in Mexico. Nancy was deeply rooted in her community. She attended the same church every Sunday, knew her neighbors well, and managed her life independently. She chose to live alone in a home valued at around $1 million, set on a quiet street where houses are spaced far apart, surrounded by desert landscape, towering saguaro cacti, and the kind of privacy many retirees in the Southwest seek. Despite her independence, she had limited mobility, making the question of how someone entered her home that night even more difficult to ignore. She was physically fragile. Nancy could not walk more than 50 yards on her own and depended on daily medication to manage a chronic heart condition. 1 dose in the morning, 1 at night, both essential to her survival. A pacemaker had been implanted in her chest, connected via Bluetooth to an iPhone app that tracked her heart rhythm in real time. During the day, she relied on powerful hearing aids. But every night, before going to bed, she removed them and placed them on the nightstand beside her phone. Without them, she heard nothing. No voices, no movement, not even footsteps in the hallway outside her bedroom. She weighed around 150 pounds, vulnerable and alone. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy took an Uber to her daughter Annie's home, just a few miles away, for a simple family dinner and game night. She arrived at approximately 5:32 p.m. The night was ordinary: shared meals, laughter, conversation, the kind of quiet, familiar evening families cherish. At around 9:50 p.m., she was driven back home. The garage door opened, then closed. She was inside. She was safe. Everything was exactly as she had left it. Her medication sat on the counter. Her hearing aids rested on the nightstand next to her phone. Her life, undisturbed. And then, for the next 14 hours, there was silence. No calls. No messages. No one stopping by to check if the 84-year-old woman, with a pacemaker, a serious heart condition, and limited mobility, had taken her medication and was resting safely in her own bed. She wasn't reported missing in the middle of the night. No one sensed danger. No one felt that something was wrong. The alarm only came hours later, when a friend from church called her daughter, Annie, at 11:56 a.m. on February 1st, concerned that Nancy had not logged in to the virtual Sunday service she never missed. Annie drove straight to her mother's house. She checked every room. She searched the entire property. Inside, she found everything: Nancy's phone, her hearing aids, her medication, her keys, her wallet, even her car still sitting in the garage. Everything that belonged to Nancy Guthrie was there. Everything except Nancy. At 12:03 p.m., the family called 911. By that point, whatever had happened to Nancy had likely already unfolded nearly 10 hours earlier. The timeline that follows has been confirmed through multiple sources: statements from Sheriff Chris Nanos, briefings from FBI officials, and reports from major news organizations. According to that timeline, at exactly 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026, the Nest doorbell camera at the front entrance of Nancy Guthrie's home was deliberately disabled. Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed during a press conference on February 5th that the doorbell camera had been deliberately disabled. He refused to explain exactly how it was done, but made it clear this was not a technical glitch, not a battery issue. The implication was unmistakable: someone physically tampered with the camera, taking it offline before entering the property. At 2:12 a.m., motion detection systems registered activity at the home. But with the camera already disabled, there was no video, only a silent record that something or someone had moved through the property. Then, at 2:28 a.m., another critical detail emerged. Nancy's pacemaker suddenly stopped syncing with the iPhone resting on her nightstand. The phone had not been touched. It remained exactly where she left it, next to her hearing aids, beside her bed. Former FBI Deputy Director and CNN law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe later addressed this detail in an interview. When a pacemaker loses its Bluetooth connection to its paired device, he explained, the most likely reason is distance. These devices only work within a limited range. If the connection is lost, it strongly suggests the person wearing the pacemaker has moved beyond that range. Which leads to a chilling conclusion: Nancy was no longer in that room. She was being moved. She was being taken. By the time that signal was lost, she was already gone from the house. At 2:36 a.m., a Ring doorbell camera belonging to neighbors Elias and Danielle Stratagulas, who live roughly 2.5 miles away, captured a vehicle passing through their neighborhood, adding yet another piece to a timeline that is only becoming more disturbing. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz later drove the exact route from Nancy's home to the Stratagulas' residence. The trip took just 6 minutes. Now consider the timeline. Her pacemaker disconnected at 2:28 a.m. 6 minutes of driving would place a vehicle in that neighboring area at approximately 2:34. The camera there captured a vehicle at 2:36 a.m., a gap of only 2 minutes. Just enough time for a driver to slow down, check mirrors, steady their hands, and turn onto a quiet road in the middle of the night, with 150 pounds of human weight concealed in the back. What makes this detail even more striking is that the Stratagula's home sat outside the official search perimeter. The Pima County Sheriff's Department had limited their canvass to a 2-mile radius. The neighbor's home was 2.5 miles away. Investigators never reached out to them. It was the homeowners themselves who came forward after watching news coverage and recognizing the timestamp. When authorities finally arrived at Nancy's home at 12:03 p.m., nearly 11 hours after the camera had been disabled, they made a disturbing discovery. Blood was found on the front porch, on the door, and in the driveway. The Sheriff's Department later confirmed through DNA testing that the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie. Former FBI Special Agent Maureen O'Connell, an expert in crime scene analysis, reviewed the blood pattern and shared her findings publicly. The droplets, she explained, were falling straight down from a fixed height. There were no signs of footprints disturbing the blood, no smearing, no drag marks across the surface. Her conclusion was direct. Nancy had been wrapped in something, likely a sheet or blanket, and carried out through the front door. She did not walk out of that house on her own. Further complicating the case, the FBI, working alongside Google engineers over a 10-day period, was able to recover fragments of footage from the Nest doorbell camera. According to FBI Director Kash Patel, this data came from residual information stored in back-end systems. Normally, without a cloud subscription, such footage would only exist locally on the device. Yet somehow, even after the camera was taken offline, traces of what happened that night still remained. Under normal circumstances, if a device like that is disabled or destroyed, the footage is gone for good. But in this case, Google engineers managed to recover what FBI Director Kash Patel described as residual data, small fragments of video that had briefly transmitted to servers before the camera was completely taken offline. That process took 10 days of intensive technical work. What they recovered became some of the most widely broadcast images in the country. A masked figure standing on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, moving with what body language experts called a sense of control. There was no hesitation, no nervous scanning of the surroundings. His head remained down as he walked directly toward the camera, as if he already knew exactly where it was. He tapped the lens twice, almost like he was testing it, then covered it using leaves pulled from a nearby potted plant. From that footage, the FBI built a profile. The suspect was identified as male, approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, with an average build. He wore a full face covering, dark clothing, and black nitrile gloves. On his back was a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack, sold exclusively at Walmart. A gun holster was visible on his right hip. And despite the gloves, forensic analysts noted what appeared to be a partial tattoo on his right wrist. One detail, confirmed independently by multiple major news networks, added another layer to the case. An image of the suspect without the backpack was captured on a different day than the footage showing him fully equipped. In other words, he had been there before. A prior visit. A reconnaissance. He came once to observe, to plan, to make sure everything would work. Then he left. And later, he returned. And it's within that context that one overlooked detail becomes impossible to ignore. If you look closely at the many photographs of Nancy Guthrie's front entrance, images captured by news crews and shared widely across coverage, you can see it clearly. There, right in front of the main wooden door, is a security gate. Not decorative. Not ornamental. A functional barrier, made of wrought iron or steel mesh, powder-coated to withstand the elements, secured within a reinforced steel frame bolted directly into the structure of the home. These types of gates are common across the Southwest, especially in places like Arizona and Southern California, where homes built in the 1970s and 1980s often rely on them as a primary layer of protection. The design is straightforward but effective. The gate swings outward on heavy-duty hinges and locks into place with a deadbolt that anchors into the door frame. When the inner wooden door is open, the mesh allows air to pass through, keeping the home ventilated while still preventing insects, animals, or strangers from entering. It allows residents to see and speak to whoever is outside, without ever having to unlock the barrier. That's the point. These gates are not meant to be easily defeated. They are designed to make forced entry so difficult that it would require time, tools, and enough noise to alert neighbors, while leaving behind obvious, undeniable damage. Laura, a neighbor who spoke on camera to NBC correspondent Brian Enton on March 16, knows this firsthand. She has lived in the Catalina foothills for over a decade and has the exact same type of security gate installed on her own home. When she saw the footage of the masked suspect standing at Nancy Guthrie's front door, she immediately recognized something others might have missed. That man was not trying to break in. As she put it, calmly but with absolute certainty, "You're not breaking into those gates. You're never going to break into that security gate." She even mentioned speaking with a security professional just weeks earlier, who confirmed the same thing. Without the right tools, without significant noise, and without leaving clear signs behind, getting through that gate simply isn't happening. Laura wasn't speculating. She was describing a physical reality that anyone familiar with these gates immediately understands. To force one open, you would need serious tools: bolt cutters to slice through the mesh, a pry bar strong enough to bend the frame, or enough leverage and time to rip the bolts from the door frame itself. And every one of those methods comes with consequences: noise, visible damage, time spent exposed on a front porch, within range of neighbors, under a camera that might still be recording. This isn't something done quietly, quickly, or without leaving a trace. But the man in the footage has none of that. No tools, no bolt cutters, no pry bar. In the clearest frames, his gloved hands are empty, except for the bits of vegetation he uses to cover the camera. He doesn't look like someone prepared to force his way through a steel security barrier in the middle of the night. Even more telling, when investigators arrived 11 hours later, the gate was intact. No bent frame, no cut mesh, no signs of forced entry at all. That's why Laura doesn't believe he came through that front door by force. She believes he was standing there, waiting for someone inside to open it. This is the theory she shared in detail during her interview with Brian Enton, and it's not casual speculation. It comes from someone who lives in that exact neighborhood, who uses the same security system, and who has spent 44 days trying to understand how this could have happened. "I don't think he was the main person," she said. "I think he was the one outside, waiting for them to come out." Her reasoning is simple: if you have a gate like that, you're not getting in. Not without noise, not without tools, not without damage. So what was he doing there? Look at the footage again through that lens. He isn't pulling on the gate. He isn't testing the lock. He isn't trying to force anything. He's just standing there, head down, as if he's waiting for a moment. And there's one more detail Laura pointed out. Nancy's front door has glass panels on both sides. If the inner wooden door was open, as it often is in warm climates for airflow, then through the mesh and the glass, you could see inside the house. Which raises a chilling possibility. He wasn't trying to get in. He may have been looking in. If the inside of the house was dark, or if the main wooden door was closed, visibility from the outside would have been extremely limited. Laura believes the man on the porch wasn't trying to break in at all. He was trying to look inside. Trying to see if the person within was ready. Trying to confirm that whatever plan had been set in motion was unfolding as expected. She took that idea even further. In her view, there may have already been someone inside the house, an accomplice, preparing to bring Nancy out. The man at the front door, she suggests, was waiting for that moment. Waiting for the door to open so he could help. So what would that scenario actually look like? Someone gains access to Nancy's home before 1:47 a.m. That entry could have happened in several ways. They might have arrived earlier in the evening, while Nancy was still awake, posing as someone familiar or trustworthy. A delivery worker. A service provider. A neighbor. Someone with a believable reason to be there. Nancy, known to be warm and trusting after decades in the same community, may have opened the door without hesitation. Or the person may have already had access. A key. Prior permission. someone who had worked on the property or been trusted with entry in the past. They could have let themselves in quietly, or used knowledge of her routine to enter through an unlocked door or window. However it happened, the key detail is this: they were already inside when Nancy went to bed, likely sometime between 10 o'clock and 10:30 p.m., not long after returning home at 9:50. And then, they waited. They may have waited for hours, until she was asleep, until the neighborhood was silent, until the risk of being seen or heard was as low as possible. At 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera was disabled. Not destroyed. Not ripped from the wall. Disabled in a precise way, intended to stop it from recording. It worked in the moment, even if later data recovery would reveal fragments of what happened. Then, sometime between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m., a second person arrived at the front door. The person inside was expecting him. The timing was coordinated. The security gate was unlocked. The wooden door opened. The man outside stepped in. And then, together, they moved Nancy. From wherever she was inside the house, they brought her to the front entrance. She was wrapped in something, likely to contain the blood from an injury. She was carried, not walking. Taken out through the front door, placed into a vehicle, and driven away. At 2:36 a.m., that vehicle appears on a neighbor's Ring camera 2.5 miles away. This isn't speculation built from nothing. It's a reconstruction, assembled piece by piece from the physical evidence, the confirmed timeline, and the details that, when viewed together, begin to form a far more unsettling picture of what may have happened that night. The security gate was intact, and the wooden door showed no signs of forced entry. That alone raises serious questions. More importantly, the 41-minute gap between the camera going offline and Nancy's pacemaker losing signal suggests something slow, controlled, and deliberate inside the house. Not the rushed, chaotic behavior you would expect from a lone intruder acting under pressure. The blood evidence tells a similar story. Droplets fell straight down, with no smearing, no drag marks, no indication of struggle across surfaces. This pattern is consistent with someone being carried carefully, not dragged, and moved in a way designed to minimize evidence. Then there's the physical reality. Nancy weighed around 150 pounds and had limited mobility. According to Laura, who had experience caring for her own elderly mother, even assisting someone much lighter up a few steps can be difficult, especially without urgency or fear. For a single person to carry Nancy out of the house, down steps, across a driveway, and into a vehicle, quietly, without dropping her, without leaving visible traces, would be extremely difficult. But with two people, it becomes far more realistic. And if one of those individuals was already inside the home, with access to unlock the security gate, then the entire situation changes. The footage at the front door no longer suggests a break-in, it suggests coordination. Timing. A plan carried out between two people. In that context, the man on the porch doesn't appear to be forcing entry. He appears to be waiting. This possibility is further supported by another critical detail: the reconnaissance visit. Multiple major news organizations have confirmed that one of the recovered images, showing the suspect without a backpack, was captured on a different day. That means he had been there before, likely observing, preparing, and confirming that the plan could work before returning to execute it. The image of the suspect without a backpack, captured on a different day, changes the narrative. That visit wasn't the night of the crime, it was reconnaissance. A calculated approach in daylight or early evening, when his presence wouldn't raise suspicion. He came to observe, to study the layout, to locate the camera, to understand the security gate, and to confirm that whatever information he had been given was accurate. Even if someone had inside knowledge, seeing it firsthand mattered. It confirmed this was not impulsive, this was planned. Then there's the camera. Disabled at 1:47 a.m. in a way that suggested the suspect believed it would stop all recording. But Nancy didn't have a cloud subscription, something not visible from the outside. The camera looked standard. Knowing that detail implies familiarity with the system, possibly from someone who had been inside the home before. The attempt failed in the long run, but in the moment, it worked. No forced entry was ever found. No damage to the security gate, No broken door, no shattered windows, no pry marks, none of the signs you would expect. That leaves only a few possibilities: a key, an unlocked entry point, or someone opening the door from inside. And each of those points back to one thing: prior access, prior knowledge. Finally, the timeline. From 1:47 a.m. to 2:28 a.m., 41 minutes. For one person acting alone, that window would require too much: entering quietly, navigating in the dark, finding Nancy, subduing her, possibly searching the home, wrapping her, carrying her out, and leaving without noise or trace. Every minute increases the risk. Every step adds pressure. But with two people, one already inside, one arriving at the door, that timeline becomes far more controlled, far more efficient, and far more possible. Most criminals act fast. Get in, get out. But 41 minutes tells a different story. It suggests patience, coordination, and control. If two people were involved, one already inside, one entering after the camera was disabled, then that window becomes logical. Time to secure Nancy, wrap her to contain bleeding, carry her carefully, avoid noise, avoid mistakes, and make sure nothing was left behind. One person would rush. Two people could move methodically. The blood evidence supports that possibility. Droplets falling straight down, no smearing, no drag marks, consistent with someone being carried. But carrying a 150-pound person, possibly unconscious or resisting, is difficult for one individual. It requires strength, balance, coordination. With two people, one at the shoulders, one at the legs, it becomes controlled, manageable, quieter. The blood pattern alone doesn't prove it, but combined with everything else, it fits. Then investigators uncovered something even more telling: a pattern of dates. January 11th. January 24th. February 1st. All Saturdays. The FBI specifically asked neighbors to review footage from January 24th, a date never publicly mentioned before. That suggests multiple visits. Reconnaissance. Return. Execution. Not random. Not impulsive. Planned over weeks, possibly longer. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was deliberate. Someone studied the house, the routine, the timing. Someone believed this target was worth the risk. And one final detail raises the stakes even further. The FBI asked whether the internet in the area went down that night. That's not a casual question. If connectivity was disrupted, Wi-Fi cut, signals blocked, it could explain why Nancy's phone stopped transmitting location data, why nearby cameras failed to capture useful footage, and why the trail seemed to disappear so completely. If that's true, then this wasn't just planned. It was executed with precision. If internet connectivity was disrupted that night, it could explain several of the case's biggest mysteries. The Nest doorbell camera didn't upload footage in real time, forcing the FBI and Google to spend 10 days recovering fragments of data from back-end systems. If the network was down, the camera simply couldn't transmit, no matter what it recorded. And that points to something more advanced than a typical break-in. There are only a few ways to do that. One is physical: cutting fiber or cable lines at nearby junction points. It's not complicated for someone with basic knowledge of telecommunications, and the outage would affect multiple homes instantly. The other is more sophisticated: using a signal jammer. Illegal, but accessible. Powerful enough to disrupt Wi-Fi and cellular signals across a neighborhood. Small enough to fit in a backpack, the same kind the suspect was seen carrying. Either method requires planning, technical awareness, an understanding that digital systems, cameras, phones, networks, can be neutralized. Most criminals don't think that way. They focus on physical entry. This suggests something different: either experience in IT or telecommunications, or guidance from someone who has it. Laura didn't notice any outage that night. She was asleep. And by the time questions arose, she had already changed internet providers, losing access to logs that might have confirmed a disruption. But if the FBI is asking about it, they likely have reason: data from providers, devices, or other neighbors. If connectivity was intentionally cut, it strengthens the theory of coordination. Not just one person, but multiple. Someone inside. Someone outside. Possibly even a third with technical expertise. And that shifts the investigation entirely. Authorities are no longer just looking for the masked man on the porch, they're looking for access. Because while the family has been officially cleared, there are others who may have had legitimate reasons to enter Nancy's home. Service workers, contractors, caregivers, delivery drivers, even acquaintances or neighbors who had been inside before. Each of those connections leaves a trail, records, visits, phone data. And if this was planned across multiple dates, January 11th, January 24th, February 1st, then somewhere in those patterns, investigators believe the answers are waiting. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has consistently pointed to one chilling possibility. This wasn't random. It may have started with someone close to the home. Not necessarily a criminal, but someone who, through everyday conversation, unintentionally revealed key details about Nancy Guthrie's life. A housekeeper, a maintenance worker, a pool technician, anyone with routine access could have observed her habits, her vulnerability, her isolation. And without realizing it, they may have passed along just enough information for the wrong person to start asking questions, and eventually start planning. But if the theory about the security gate is correct, if there was no forced entry, then this goes beyond careless talk. It suggests someone didn't just share information, they participated. Someone who could open that gate. Someone who was inside that night. That narrows the field dramatically, pointing toward a motive stronger than curiosity, financial pressure, personal resentment, or even coercion from an outside partner. That possibility gains weight when paired with what Sheriff Chris Nanos recently admitted in an interview. Yes, this person could strike again. At the same time, he called the crime targeted, but couldn't clearly define why. And that ambiguity is what's unsettling. Was Nancy chosen because she was elderly, wealthy, and alone? Or because someone knew her, her routine, her home, her weaknesses? Meanwhile, the investigation is expanding rapidly. The FBI is analyzing DNA using advanced genealogy methods, tracking phone signals across multiple dates, scanning router data for hidden digital traces, and even tracing a Walmart backpack seen in the footage through purchase records. Every piece is being examined, every pattern mapped. And yet, one detail continues to stand out above all, that untouched security gate. Because it suggests something investigators may have suspected from the very beginning. This wasn't just an intrusion from the outside. Someone was already inside. Someone who was trusted. After 44 days, no arrests, but the direction is becoming clearer. The evidence is aligning. And somewhere between the missing footage, the silent 41 minutes, and that unlocked gate, there is a name waiting to be uncovered.